Welcome into the episode of Patrick Jones Baseball. In this week's episode, we have Nick Lemke on the podcast. Nick is a registered dietitian, and he's someone who works with baseball players across the country. And we dig deep into this episode and talk a lot about obviously nutrition, but some of the specific things that you need to be doing in order to increase your weight and increase your muscle. And what are the things, probably even more importantly, that you shouldn't be doing? So I think if you're someone out there who's trying to put on muscle, or maybe you have a son or a player who's trying to put on muscle, this is a great episode for you. Nick does a phenomenal job. We're going to put all of his contact information in the show notes. And so I hope you enjoy today's episode with Nick Lemke. All right, Nick, thanks a lot for coming on the podcast, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Patrick.
So I wanted to first ask you if you think this is good advice, the advice that I'm giving, that I've pretty much have always given to kids, the advice I've always given to kids, especially and predominantly, I'd say today we'll probably focus on the kids who need to get bigger and stronger. Like they're trying to put on weight. And one of the things that I've always said is I personally think that it's unrealistic to get kids to track every single day forever and ever. Like they got too many things going on. However, I think I've always believed it is important for them to be at least a little bit aware of how many calories they're consuming. And so what I've always told them is to download MyFitnessPal and don't change anything. Don't change anything you eat. Just do what you normally do and just track everything for just 1 week, just to see, like, having somewhat of an idea if it's off by a couple hundred calories, like whatever, just to have somewhat of an idea of how many calories you're actually consuming on a daily basis. Good or bad advice?
That's actually not bad. So the way that I do with my clients is I have them do a 3-day food log and literally just the notes on their phone, just so that they can visually see what their day looks like. Because a lot of what I teach is like eating every 3 hours and making sure you're hitting a protein at every meal and stuff. And so that's like an easy visual for them. I do like the app idea because it allows, again, like it allows them to kind of see the calories as long as they don't fixate on that, because some of
Right.
them will be like, oh, well, it tells me I need this much. I'm like, well, how accurate really is that? Because it doesn't really know your training schedule. It doesn't really understand that, hey, these days you're training are your really intense days versus these days are like just hitting or something. And so I think understanding that is really important. And it's just like with AI, it's like the output you get from AI is determinant on the input that you put into it. So if you don't do really good job of what you put in food wise, or maybe if it asks for the training stuff, if you just say, oh, hey, just working out for an hour, it's very different depending on what you were actually doing. So it's a good like baseline though. It's a good ballpark to start with.
Okay, that's good. So let's say, for example, I'm a player. I'm motivated. My parents are supportive. They want to help as best they can for me specifically. I'm doing all the lifting. I'm lifting weights. I'm doing the skill work. I need to get bigger. I need to get stronger and put on muscle. What are the first things that I should do? Like, should it be that 3-day, that, as you just said, writing everything down? How do I? We always look at the end where we want to get really big and we want to have this perfect meal plan and this or that. But like before we get to any of that, like what are the first things that I need to do?
Yeah, I think that tracking is number one, a good starting point. Like I do that with any of my clients. Even if I'm in like doing a team program, I tell them all like, hey, do that food log, regardless of if you're sending it to me or not. Just so that you have a solid baseline. And then from there, it's looking at where those holes are. So like when I speak to like a whole team, or if I'm speaking like doing some sort of presentation, I'll pull up a sample food log from one of my clients and say, hey, like let's look at this and actually point out some of those red flags. And I get different responses from it, but the one that I often use, you'll see like 6 to 7 hour gaps between eating, and then what they end up eating is like pizza or something or whatever at the end, and so my biggest thing, what I always recommend to athletes is let's get you eating more often. So that'll be the first step with the nutrition change is eating every 3 to 4 hours, usually more on that 3 hour window, basically, because that'll allow you, rather than thinking about, oh yeah, breakfast, lunch, and dinner and snacks, it's like, no, let's eat every 3 hours and you're gonna get that volume, and you don't have to think about naming anything really.
And then how much are you eating within those during like every 3 hours? How much are you? How many calories are you consuming?
Yeah, so I don't really do like the calories and the tracking per se, but usually it's more so what they're putting into that. So for example, three big things I address with athletes right away is breakfast, pre and post workout, because chances are at least two of those three are a problem. With breakfast, it's maybe not, it's either nothing, a protein shake, or like some waffles or something. It's usually very minimal. And then with pre workout, a lot of times they're just going from lunchtime at noon until 3, 4, 5, 6 o'clock without anything, or some of their lunches are really early. And they go this long period without eating, and then they go into a workout. So they're running on empty. And then post workout, a lot of times, depending on when that's done, they don't eat right away. Like they may eat like an hour and a half, 2 hours later because mom, dad still have to make dinner or whatever. Making or the other issue with post workout is they just do protein. So my big thing with them is let's look at the components of those things. So with breakfast, I try to hit everything. So hitting a solid protein source, hitting a solid carb source. Naturally, you're going to get some fats in there, especially protein at breakfast. You're usually going to have some fats in there. And then just try to get some color, even if it's just like a banana, some fruit, something. Definitely more complex carbs, those slow digesting carbs, like the whole grains, the potatoes, the fruits, things that are going to give you more steady energy versus like I see a lot of kids, they'll snack, like they'll eat like cereal and it's like, okay, you're going to get like this spike of energy most of the time because it's a lot of sugar and then you like drop off. And they do that with the snacking too, where it's like an applesauce or something. And so I'd rather you use those quick carbs, those quick sugars, use those as a pre-workout because that is going to give you more consistent, or that's going to give you the energy. You're going to get it into your system faster. I kind of describe it as that a Ferrari on the road, the Ferrari on the road is going to get to its destination a lot faster without any interference. And like if you have no traffic, that Ferrari is going to go faster and it's going to get to its destination a lot quicker. That's like the applesauce, the oranges, the sports drinks that have the sugar in it. That's going to be that quick energy, like 30 minutes before workout. So that'll give you that quick boost versus if you start shoving in just potato, for example, or if you're doing all the protein or if you're doing all the fats and stuff, like those things are basically the minivans or some of those other cars on the road that prevents that fast car from trying to get to where it wants to go. So it's not going to give you, and that destination being your muscles, giving you that energy for the workout.
So an orange for breakfast wouldn't be ideal because you would get that spike of sugar and energy, and then you'd feel a drop off after.
Not, I mean, if it was the only thing, it's different. Like, that's why I always emphasize let's hit all the macros because if you're having that with eggs and toast, or you're having that with the breakfast burrito or with oatmeal or whatever, with something protein wise in there, you're going to get less of that spike. But I just try to emphasize like, yeah, fruits are definitely like oranges, bananas, fine at breakfast. But I also like to try to encourage athletes like, hey, you can leverage some of those quicker sugar fruits or just quick sugar in general around your workouts. You can like leverage those a little bit more. And then if you're not going to be working out for a while, maybe an apple with peanut butter or something. Doesn't have to be with breakfast, but just in general.
How long are you eating before you work out?
So that'll depend, but usually it depends on the athlete because you got to think like sensitivity of stomach and stuff. But we'll just say the typical practice, is often like a 3 to 4 o'clock, or it's like a 6 or 7 or something later like that. And so with those right after school workouts, it can be hard for a lot of athletes to eat something during that fifth or sixth period, which would be ideal, like an hour to 2 hours before. It would be ideal to get another snack in, even if it's like a PB&J or bagel or Cliff Bar, something like that, something more carb focused with a little bit of protein. But most have trouble with that. They don't have enough of that time. So if you have to go and work out right after school, then that's where I say, hey, let's do a banana or let's do some of that. Like even if it is 30 minutes before, especially with baseball, it's less intense. For soccer, basketball players, they tend to have more issues. But with baseball and softball, it's usually you're not going to be doing some crazy conditioning like right off the bat type of stuff. So, like just to give you an example of what one of my guys does when he was he's doing like running start this year, but when he was doing like normal high school last year, he would go straight to workouts like right after school, but it was like usually it'll take him like 20-30 minutes, and so he's like eating a PB&J and some applesauce like on his way to those workouts, and that usually worked really really well for him.
Yeah, so that's the thing is you really do have to plan ahead
Yes.
because you're leaving the house. It's not like, for example, I work on my computer during the day, and I don't have to plan ahead because I can make stuff at my place and then go back to work and then make stuff I want to. But if I'm out and about and I can't go back to my own place to get stuff, I really need to make sure I have to plan ahead. So I assume for these kids and these, whether it be high school kids, college kids, whoever, pro players, they really do need to make sure that they plan ahead. Is there any tips you can give on doing that? Is that something they do the day before, the night before, a certain day of the week they pick? What's your advice on that?
Yeah. So the first thing I'll say is I like baseball players because they're creatures of habit. And so the nice thing is just find something that you can do on a daily basis and just stick to it. So if the PB&Js is something you can do every day, then like just stick to it and you can, make multiple in advance. If the Cliff Bars work really well for you, then it's like, hey, you don't even have to make those. That's an easy thing you can throw in your bag. But I would recommend doing it ideally the night before, because what I see happen with a lot of these athletes is they wake up in the morning, it's hard for them to get out of bed, or they sleep in by accident, they sleep through their whatever happens. There's always excuses in the mornings to not get everything that you need done. And so my recommendation is do it the night before so that you don't even have to worry about it in the morning. And so whether that be making the sandwiches in advance, maybe doing Greek yogurt parfaits in advance, having the bars already in your bag ready to go. Yeah, that makes it a lot easier. And I always recommend, I'm sure like habit stacking, like always connecting a new habit with an old habit. So, for example, if you want to make your lunch the next day, or if you want to have those pre workout snacks ready to go for the next day, connect that to something you're already doing, which is dinner. You're already eating dinner. You might as well, if you're going to use leftovers from dinner, just shove it into a container, have it ready to go. So the next morning, all you're doing is taking that container, or with the bars, putting them in your bag like right after dinner, but connected to something you're already doing. That'll help you stick to it easier.
Parents, are you tired of spending money going from showcase to camp, not even knowing if a coach is even looking for your son's position or even knows his name? One of the reasons that I started my college baseball recruiting service is to help guide families throughout the recruiting process so you're not having to waste money and time going from showcase or camp to camp. If you're interested in hearing more about how I can help your son, head to patrickjonesbaseball.com and fill out the form. That's patrickjonesbaseball.com. Fill out the form right on the homepage, and I'll be in touch. All right, back to the podcast. What advice would you have for the parents out there? Because let's face it, none of these kids are buying any of this food themselves. So it really comes down to the parents. Is there certain things that they should buy in bulk at the store? Any tips in general that you've seen or that work from a parent perspective?
Yeah. So I would say definitely making things easy. The things you want them to have, make it more easy to access. So if you don't want them having chips all the time, let's not have a big pile of different chip bags and things like that in the pantry, because it's like, yeah, when it's right in sight, you're more likely to grab it. And so focus more on, hey, maybe you guys have, like, my sister has little compartments for each little thing of like, okay, these are, Williams things, these are Cameron's things, these are like some of the like applesauce type stuff. And so even if you're able to be like, hey, here is your pre-workout like shelf basically, or that where you have the Cliff Bars, you have the applesauces, you have maybe electrolyte packets, like you have different things kind of in a section. And I would definitely buy more of that kind of stuff in bulk. I think anything that you're going to have to use in a pinch, you're probably going to have a lot more of those things. So again, Cliff Bars are like the kind energy bars, easy to find at Costco, maybe some protein bars. And that's a whole conversation to unpack, is protein bars themselves. But applesauce, another easy Costco buy that you can buy in bulk. Those little like pure organic fruit bars, the little like fruit leather things, those are quick energy. That can be really nice. A lot of my guys like those, like in between innings and things like that. The electrolyte packets. I would say having stuff that is individually packaged is really, really important, because your athletes, like if it's something that they have to cut up, they have to do a lot of work on, they're less likely to do it versus if it's already something that's like pre-prep. That's why my sister pre-cuts a bunch of bell peppers for the week, because she knows that they're going to eat them if they're already pre-cut. So
Interesting. Yeah, it's something that it's kind of one of those things. The nutrition side is not as cool, I would say, as hitting in the cages, lifting weights, doing this kind of stuff, but it's just as important. It really is just as important. I think you look at the players who get recruited and the players who play at the highest level, they look the part. And you can make the argument, well, that's genetics. It doesn't matter what the reason is, they look the part. So if you don't look the part, this is an easy way to be able to put yourself in a better position to look the part from a physical standpoint. And I think that's something that a lot of players don't take as seriously because it's easy to overlook. And I guess my question for you, Nick, is if someone's not putting on weight, it does it come down to it's just you're just not consuming enough calories. Like that's literally it.
Yeah. No, that's 100%. I've had a number of guys tell me, "Oh, but I eat all the time." And then I look at their food log and it's like, "Okay, a couple days look good." But then there's like one day where again, they're going 6 hours without eating. They're not eating breakfast consistently. Maybe their weekends are a struggle. Like I had a quarterback who he's like, well, I'm being consistent. I'm, like whatever. And I was like, okay, weigh yourself on Mondays, weigh yourself on Fridays. And what we found was he was losing weight on the weekends, gaining it during the week. And it was because, yeah, again, long gaps between eating on the weekends. And so that's where we just focus more energy on. And so I think that's two biggest things. Number one, consistency. That is the number one issue anybody has with nutrition, is just sticking to it. And so yeah, if you can build that consistency there, that's what's going to really move the needle for you. And that means, number two, building habits that you can stick to.
And then over how long of a period does it take for them to see results? So let's say I am being consistent. When can I expect to see some results? And then at what point, if I'm not seeing results, do I need to reevaluate what I'm doing?
Yeah. So when I work with my athletes, I send them weekly check-ins, and consistently with all of them within the first week or 2 weeks, when they start making changes, whatever those first changes are, they start experiencing more energy. And they're like, I can start lifting heavier. I feel more energetic. Like that, you're going to see that before you're going to see the scale move too much. So that's like the first thing. But then when we look at like, yeah, just overall growth, like realistically, you can only really gain about a half a pound of actual muscle like a week. It's like a quarter to a half or something like that. It's like very, very small numbers. However, some of that weight gain that you're going to see, especially initially, is going to not just be body fat, it's going to be water, like because a lot of them, they underconsume on carbs. So when they start eating more carbs, they're going to hold on to more water. If they decide to take creatine, they're also holding on to more water in that case. And yeah, so like when I have athletes who maybe they gain 2 pounds a week, those first couple weeks, I'm like, yeah, some of that was water weight. Like, yeah, they might have gained a little bit of body fat, but that's why I always recommend your average should be about a half a pound to a pound a week. So that's why I always stress to guys, like, even if we look at right now, like baseball season is in 2 to 3 months, depending on the state you're in, you realistically at most could gain, like in 2 months, realistically, like at most 8 pounds. And not all of that's going to be muscle. You're definitely going to gain water weight for sure, but you also might gain a little bit of body fat with that. The thing though, the nice thing, I just want to highlight this though, is a lot of my athletes, they'll gain a little extra weight before the season, and then they naturally lean out a little bit during high school season. And so they maintain weight, but then decrease body fat. Yeah. And then, yeah.
No, I guess I just had one quick question. Is there a natural, is everyone from a genetic standpoint is a little bit different? Let's say, for example, there's a high school sophomore right now, weighs 145 pounds, and he doesn't have a hair on his body, and starts consuming 5,000 calories a day. Is he just going to get bigger and just speed up the development process for him? Because I feel like a part of this is genetics too, no?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a genetic component. I do want to call out the 5,000 calorie thing, because one thing that I hear a lot with baseball and football, especially, is they will just say, oh, I'm just hitting a specific calorie goal. And they'll go from what they probably were eating, maybe 2,000 calories at most a day, to saying, oh, hey, I'm going for 4,000 or 5,000. That right there,
Mhm.
you're going to gain body fat. Like there's no way that you're going to double your calories or, eat that many more calories a day and not gain body fat. But yeah, I mean, I will say there's definitely some genetic things. Like when we look at height, like some people just have those late jumps in height, and that's just kind of how things happen. But I also find that a lot of the people that I talk to that tell me, like I've even had some recent sales calls where they're like, well, like we were, parents were also like just thinner in high school, and we kind of filled out later, or whatever that might be. And same with the metabolism piece. But it's like it's also the fact that those parents weren't necessarily doing the things required. And that's what a lot of the athletes are also not doing the things that are required to actually gain that weight. And so I do believe that, yeah, they may not gain, really fast like some other kids, but I do believe any of them can gain the muscle and size that they're looking for if they're consistent with it.
It's just gonna take a certain amount of time, like you
Yeah.
said. And I think the one of the things too, you mentioned the body fat. Is body fat bad?
Not necessarily, because we do need body fat. Like, I mean, number one, it's an insulation. Body fat does store key nutrients. So we think of like the fat soluble vitamins, that there are roles in that. It impacts hormones, a lot of different things. I just think like to a degree, it may slow you down. If you're gaining weight too fast, like, and you're gaining a lot of excess body fat, then that's going to potentially, you're going to lose speed, which I know pitchers may not care as much about. But in general, it's like, hey, if we carry that weight really well, like we're going to perform better. Like if you just start gaining a ton of weight and you like that could impact your sluggishness, even like your energy levels if you're
Yeah.
if you're getting too fast. So
Is there a good body fat percentage that kids should be going for? And then is that something that you recommend that they get tested for?
I don't typically, I mean, number one, it's not really feasible at this point. Like there's just not enough access to that. I honestly don't think high schoolers need to worry about that. I focus more on, hey, how like more just focus on the appearance piece of it of like, okay, yeah, I'm like slimming down, or hey, like my clothes are fitting better. So like when my athletes are when I have some who are trying to lean out, but I don't really do numbers with that because it can, especially with the developing brain and all of the other stresses they have and the hormones they got going on in their teen years. Like I don't really stress too much about like the numbers like that because yeah, they can obsess over it. I've unfortunately had like a couple kids, even baseball players, who have like obsessed over it a little too much, simply because of how kids talk about them and some of that bullying type of stuff, which is one thing I highlight in my book. But yeah.
Gotcha. Supplements. Thoughts on supplements? I've been killing the barbells, protein bars lately. They're amazing. Don't know if they're any good for you or not. What are your thoughts on supplements in general? Like, is it something where they're a little bit overrated? I mean, it's kind of a cheat sheet type of a thing where you can use them as needed. Like, what are your thoughts on supplements as a whole?
Yeah. So number one, I would say they're overrated because of our obsession with them. It's just like with medications, like our society's obsessed. Like everyone's got to have a medication, like whatever.
Quick
Yeah,
fix.
quick fixes. And so, yeah, with supplements, it's becoming this thing where everyone thinks like they can take a supplement to fix whatever. They try to do pre-workout because they're tired. It's like, well, that caffeine, you don't need the caffeine. You need better sleep, better nutrition, better hydration. That's going to fix that issue. But then things like that actually are valuable. Like there's only a handful that I would even consider with high school athletes. The basics would be like vitamin D, especially in regions like my area where you don't get a lot of sunlight. Omega 3s, a lot of them are not consuming enough fish. So I would number one try to see if we can consume enough of the fatty fish. But if we can't, looking at the omega 3, at least during high intensity time periods like travel season or high school season, like looking at maybe taking omega 3 because that helps with the recovery side of things. So less likely to get injured, sick, etc. So those would be like say vitamin D, omega 3, and then creatine would be the big one. And I know that's the one that everyone wants to talk about. And yes, it does help you build muscle. It helps you with more of that explosive type movement. So whether that be speed or strength, whatever, because it gives you more of the essentially energy in a way for that like explosive type, like less than 30-second type stuff. However, if you're thinking you're going to take creatine to start gaining muscle and you still can't even eat consistently, like you're not really going to like gain the amount that you want. So that's why I always emphasize food first. Let's make sure you're doing the every 3 hours. Let's make sure you're eating consistently throughout the day, eating enough. Start gaining weight with the nutrition first. Then we add the creatine because again, you're not going to gain the size you want if the nutrition doesn't match. And like I mentioned earlier, creatine does hold on to water. And so you might be like, oh, I'm gaining weight. It's like, well, some of that weight that you're gaining is definitely water weight with the creatine. So, and I see that when I do my body composition stuff.
I've heard you mention a few times now Cliff Bars. Is that your favorite protein type of bar or a bar that you recommend to people for a specific reason?
So yeah, so I wouldn't consider it necessarily a protein bar. Yes, it has like the 10 grams of protein, but I think of it as because it has like that 40 grams of carbs. And so if you think about a PB&J, for example, PB&J is going to be depending on the size of the bread and how much jelly or whatever you put on there, it's going to be about 45 grams of carbs, maybe a little bit more than that. And then the peanut butter and the bread's probably going to give you maybe 10 to 15 grams of protein. So it's very comparable to, say, a PB&J, but it's a lot easier to transport, easier to work with. Uh, and so that's why I like those ones. And because they're so accessible, like you can get them pretty much anywhere, including Costco, versus like I like the Kind Energy bars or like some of the equivalents. You just don't see them in as many stores with that specific type of the Kind bar. And then yeah, and it's just so easy to pair with, because if you're like, hey, I've got that as part of my post workout, hey, I still want to add another 10 to 15 grams of protein, throw a Core Power, Fairlife, whatever with that. And it's like, hey, you've got protein carbs there. Or if you're like, hey, I need more carbs, then it's like, yeah, we add a banana, oranges, some sort of fruit with it. So it's just like there's a lot you can do with it. But I try to encourage my athletes, focus on the Cliff Bars around your workouts, especially like the pre-workout, and utilize more of the wholer foods like the sandwiches, the yogurts, those types of things, maybe earlier in the day as your snacks, your lunches, etc. Because I find some guys, they try to be too dependent on bars, and they'll be like, oh, I had a Cliff Bar here, I had a protein bar there, another Cliff Bar here, and I'm like, all right, guys, we can eat like normal food too, not depend
Yeah,
on the
yeah.
bars. So yeah, but it's just a nice leverage. And when it comes to protein bars though, like there's a lot of stuff out there. Like even we'll just say the Gatorade bars. Yes, they have the macros you need. Like they have like I think it's like 20 or 25 grams of protein, and then like double that in carbs. So it's like a good bar for like a post workout. It just has so much other stuff in it, and that's where I'm like not a huge fan of just all the extra ingredients, because like even when I think of me, like I'm like, I just feel crappy on the stomach when I eat that one of those. And I've had other athletes comment the same. And so yeah, I just try to, if we can improve the quality, and usually the Cliff Bars and some of those just have less junk in them, so that's usually why I emphasize them.
What about eating before bed? And this is something I see on social media a lot, not necessarily in this arena where it's the sports nutrition for athletes, but just in general, like you shouldn't. I think I've seen like the 3-2-1 method. You want to eat 3 hours before bed, stop drinking any liquids 2 hours before bed, and then no screens 1 hour before bed. Obviously, that's the ideal. I know everyone is going to have different things that they need to do and coming home late and on the road and things like that. But is that something that people should, or these athletes should try to do if they can? Is no eating 3 hours before bed?
So that's a very important question. And this is where we have to distinguish between general nutrition and sports nutrition, because in general, yes, it is better to have more of that break. Like, yes, when you look at the healthiest societies in the world, yeah, they're usually going maybe 12 hours or 14 or whatever hours without eating, like those types of things. And usually are cutting themselves earlier. However, we're talking about a high school athlete that has to wake up at 6 a.m., has to go to school and be functional for school, then practice, then maybe have another practice, and usually is not done a lot of times with that stuff until 8, 9 o'clock at night. I don't want you not eating after that workout, because that's going to really make your muscle building efforts a problem, and you're just going to be constantly in this stressful state. And so my thing is like, yeah, if it's possible, great. But for the typical youth high school athlete, it's just not feasible to cut yourself off at night, because most of the time you are working out at night. And so yeah, if we can eat earlier, great. But at the end of the day, like there's a season for everything. And in that season, I think they do need to prioritize that. If they are a college athlete, yeah, they're going to have a little bit more flexibility, maybe with schedule. They might be able to, depending on, it depends, but certain seasons of life, they might be able to cut that down. And I think as a general adult, we should have more of a cutoff there. But for the youth athlete, it's just not feasible.
Good stuff. I definitely agree. I was just curious because again, it's something I see online, but I guess it's more applicable for someone who's 33 years old like myself for the general health reasons than a high school athlete. I wanted to ask you about hydration. One of the things that when I was growing up anyway, I would hear and you see people carrying around jugs of water and trying to get a gallon of water a day. Is that something that you recommend to these athletes as, hey, try to focus on getting a gallon of water throughout the entire day?
Yeah, so my rule of thumb with them, and you hear the drink half your body weight in water. I say that's not enough, but I use that as kind of a starting point for them. I say half a pound to or is half an ounce to an ounce per pound. So like If you're 150 pounds, that's 75 to 150 ounces of water a day. So a gallon being like 133 or something like odd like that. If you
So at least a gallon.
I mean, potentially. Again, it depends on their season, their day, their training. Like if you have a more intense day, yeah, you're going to be on that higher end of that. But if you have more of a chill day, like a Sunday or something, yeah, you probably don't need to drink, more than a gallon. With the ounces piece is like most of these guys, when I talk to them, they're only drinking 40, 60 ounces of water a day. So like I'm not going to tell them, oh, hey, go and drink a gallon of water a day. Like that's a huge jump that, and they're going to be constantly peeing. But if we progressively increase that, like say 30 ounces, go up to 80 to 90 ounces and build that routine and then increase from there. And then the second piece is looking at how much or what your pee color looks like. That's a better indicator of how much water you need. Is if it's looking more like an apple juice, then yeah, you're dehydrated. But if it's looking more like a pale lemonade, then that's more of a sign that you're hydrated. Now there's factors like antibiotics and things like that that can impact the color of our pee, but like that's really the good rule of thumb is looking at that pee color to gauge your hydration. And then the third thing, I know a lot of athletes don't want to carry around a gallon jug, and so I usually recommend like even like a 40 ounce, like a simple 32 to 40 ounces, like a sweet spot, because you don't have to constantly fill it up. But it's also can fit in some cup holders, and it doesn't take up as much space, in your bag and stuff.
You mentioned earlier caffeine. Do you not recommend athletes take caffeine before they lift or an event or something like that?
Yeah, I'm definitely not a fan of athletes taking it. Youth, high school, like the developing athlete, I think is especially important. College athletes, depending on when they're taking it, can be useful, and technically in general it can be useful. However, it's how it's used. Number one, in a developing brain, we don't know. There's a lot of questions on how caffeine impacts the developing body and developing brain and all of those things, and so that's where it's not recommended for youth in general. But the other piece, and this is where a lot of athletes, fall on, is they take it pre-workout, which is at 3 o'clock. And that caffeine has a half-life, which means it's still in your blood for about 8 to 10 hours after that. And so if you're drinking a 200 milligram pre-workout, you're going to have about half of that still in your system, like, when you're trying to go to
Yeah.
bed. And so then, yes, you might be able to fall asleep. A lot of our athletes will be like, oh, I still fall asleep fine. It's like, okay, but do you feel rested the next day? Not really, and that's where that quality comes in, and that's really what we care about. Yes, 8 to 10 hours is ideal, but it's also how good are those 8 to 10 hours? Are you actually getting into the deep sleep that helps you with the growth hormone, testosterone, all those things that actually help your development?
Last question I have for you when it comes to nutrition, when it comes to putting on weight, I think something that probably nobody really thinks about is stress and anxiety and things like that. How big of an impact does that play into transforming your body to becoming bigger and stronger and putting on muscle?
Yeah, stress, that's a definitely an interesting one. So, I mean, there's the social stress of it of like, okay, if you have a lot of things going on socially or school wise, whatever, yeah, you may not get as much done, or you may not, like, you may forget to eat, you might do different things that just may not be able to accomplish those things as well. But then I also think about stress in the physical aspect of you're constantly putting your body under stress as an athlete. Like, it's good stress in a way. Like, yes, it's going to help you continue to grow and expand those muscles and develop. But if you're not putting in the nutrition, your body's going to be constantly in that stressful state. So that's why number one, it's so important to eat in that first hour post workout, because it's been shown that like if you do with the carbs and the protein, you're going to feel a lot better going into those next workouts or those next games, whether that be on that day or even the next day. So that's like the one piece, because if you think about, yeah, our body's in a stressful state post workout, how can we get it to where it needs to be, which simply eating is the first step. But then also thinking about how can we reduce that stress, whether that be the inflammation on the body, like our joints, our muscles, or just the mental stress. And that comes down to sleep and the quality of what you're putting in. So not just going and grabbing fast food, but let's cut out more of the fried foods and the sugar and focus more on the lean meats, more of the fish, more of the fruits and the veg. Yeah, just more of the quality basically, because that's what's going to allow you to bounce back faster. And I think that's especially important for the pitcher who is constantly putting their body under that physical stress. But is that where you were asking when it comes to stress?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I was just curious. I was just curious as to what Because obviously there's a lot of these kids out here, they're dealing with stress, and it's from pressures from peers to their parents to, I mean, just a lot of different things. And I think stress from a like literally a physical standpoint can definitely take a
Yeah.
toll on you. And so I was just curious from a nutrition standpoint and a change in your body from a physical standpoint, if there was any research that stated that that would have an effect in an athlete who's trying to put on muscle. That's all.
Yeah, well, and that's where we have to find that balance. There's people on both sides of the spectrum where they're like, okay, it doesn't matter what you eat because you do want to have some of that inflammation. Like that, yes, that inflammation can help with that muscle development, which essentially the inflammation comes from like a lot of the stress, especially the physical stress. But if you're constantly in that state of inflammation, then that's where we're going to have issues because that's what's going to put you at higher risk for injury. So it's going to be hard for you to build muscle if you're injured. And so that's where we just have to find that balance. And that's where we may not go super crazy on trying to take every vitamin and antioxidant and all these different things. But if we're just like, hey, I'm going to eat fish 2, 3 times a week. I'm going to, make sure I'm eating protein and carbs post workout. I'm going to make sure I'm getting more of the fruits and the veg. Like it's going to naturally come and it's going to support that overall building process, but also the recovery process that helps reduce that stress.
Nick, this has been great stuff, man. On this podcast, we talk a lot about recruiting, tactics, tips, player development, mechanics, lifting weights, things like that. But I think this is just a low hanging fruit for so many. So I love that you're putting the word out there. You've got a lot of great content on YouTube. I think you keep going with that. I think that's going to eventually really blow up. But if someone wants to get in contact with you, follow you, where's the one place that they should go?
Yeah, so I will say I spend the most time on Instagram and Twitter, so those are the
Yep.
easiest ones, but the nice thing is I basically cross post to everything and it's the same username on all of them. So it's Nick Lemke RD, so registered dietitian is abbreviation, but it's Nick Lemke RD. That's on all platforms. That's the easiest way. And then from there you can look at my link tree, check out free resources like sample meal plans and stuff, my books on there, all that kind of stuff that you can reference.
Well, yeah, we'll put all those links in the show notes. And I'd say for everybody out there listening too, I mean, look, the nutrition piece, the cool thing and the kind of the pain in the you know what thing is also the same, where it's everyone is a little bit different and how your body reacts to different foods and things like that. And so I know enough to be dangerous, but I'm not a qualified professional. So I think going to somebody like Nick and getting the nutrition piece, that building that foundation. And what I like about the nutrition as well, Nick, from an educational standpoint, it's similar to what I like the mental game is once you learn it and you're educated on yourself from the things that they'll learn from you, you have that foundation for the rest of your life. And so that will improve the quality of your life for the rest of your life. And so I think that's something that is another added benefit, not just to current performance right away to getting stronger, but also just having the knowledge for you for the rest of your life. I think it's really crucial.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
But thanks again, man. And we'll have to do it
Yeah,
again.
thanks for having me on.